What are governor limits in Salesforce? How would you handle governor limits? What are the best practices around governor limits in Salesforce? Salesforce governor limits are usage caps enforced by Salesforce. They are required due to the multi-tenancy architecture of Salesforce. The governor limits ensure efficient processing and they allow for multiple users on the platform without impeding performance. Governor limits dictate what your code can and cannot do when executing on the Salesforce platform. This contributes to the scalability of the platform. Let's understand this with an analogy. Your Salesforce instance is set up on a shared infrastructure. There are other tenants or orgs that will be using this same shared resources for database, memory, network, or processor. This is similar to an apartment building where multiple people are using shared water, electricity, and internet connections. When the resources that a single user can use are capped or limited, it ensures everyone has the resources they need. Some types of governor limits in Salesforce are per transaction apex limits. These limits count for each apex transaction. For a batch apex, these limits are reset for each execution of a batch of records in the execute method. Per transaction certified managed package limits. The managed packages that have passed the security review for App Exchange get their own set of limits for most per transaction limits. Salesforce ISV partners develop certified managed packages which are installed in your org from App Exchange and have unique namespaces. Lightning Platform Apex Limit. These limits aren't specific to an Apex transaction and are enforced by the Lightning platform. Static Apex limits. These are Apex limits that are applied across all transactions. Size specific Apex limits. These are the Apex limits that are related to the size of the code. Miscellaneous Apex limits. There are various other Apex limits that are enforced by Salesforce. In addition to these standard governor limits, there are also email limits, which relates to the number of emails that you can receive and send, as well as the size of those emails. Push notification limits are an org can send up to 20,000 iOS and 10,000 Android push notifications per hour. Let's look at some of the best practices for governor limits or how to handle governor limits. DML or SOQL queries should be outside the for loop. This ensures if your for loop is running for more than 100 times, it does not execute an SOQL query 100 times and hit the apex SOQL 100 limit. Bulkify your code. So bulkifying the Apex code refers to the concept of making sure the code properly handles more than one record at a time. One trigger per object. A single Apex trigger is all you need for one particular object. If you develop multiple triggers for the single object, you have no way of controlling the order of execution if those triggers can run in the same context. Use batch Apex to process more than 50,000 records. So for querying large data sets, the total number of records that can be returned by SOQL queries in a request is 50,000. If returning a large set of queries causes you to exceed your heap limit, then a SOQL query for loop must be used instead. It can process multiple batches of records through the use of internal calls to query. Flow bulkification. Flows can bulkify any element that performs a DML statement or SQL query, or does something external to the flow, like sending an email. When multiple interviews for the same flow run in one transaction, each interview runs until it reaches a bulkifiable element. Salesforce takes all the interviews that stopped at the same element and intelligently executes those operations together. If other interviews are at a different element, Salesforce then intelligently executes those operations together. Salesforce repeats this process until all the interviews finish. Using collections, streamline queries, and efficient for loops. It is important to use Apex collections to efficiently query data and store the data in memory. A combination of using collections, that is collection variables, and streamlining SQL queries can substantially help writing efficient Apex code and avoid governor limits.